Leave your comments on the Ask Reddit sub, and I'll read your answers on the next episode of LWIAR. People living in third world countries. What is something that is a part of your everyday life that people in first world countries would not understand, cope with? Egypt here. Crossing the street is some kind of a sick sport. I studied abroad in Cairo, and by the third month I was playing Frogger on the Nile Corniche without thinking. If my mom saw me cross the street like that, she'd have a heart attack. I was in Egypt while it was under Mubarak, and I remember trying to contend with traffic in Cairo. I had to ask the police officer who was standing there if the drivers obey the lights or the road markings. He told me that those were there to make the roads look nice. I chickened out from crossing the street and tried to find a metro station to cut through, even if I had to pay the £1 to enter. Edit. Stepped away for a few hours, and this toast blew up. I remember my grandpa telling me a story of when him and my grandmother toured Egypt back in the probably mid-late 70s, early 80s. They were on a local Egypt airline, 737 aircraft, with wires hanging out all over the place, luggage bins wide open, and as the plane started to descend to land, everybody just kinda got up and moved to the front of the plane to disembark. If memory serves, he said there were live chickens in cages in the passenger compartment. Sounds really far-fetched, I get it, but my grandpops was a pilot, and my grandmother swears by the story, and she never got on another plane while they were in Egypt, lol. Realizing that my money and any more I could make is worth 5x less now. Welcome to Lebanon. Visited Lebanon once. Friendly people. Fantastic food. It's too bad that politicians screw everything up. Not just in Lebanon, but everywhere. I get you, man. Inflation in Argentina was 42% in July. In other countries they don't even know what inflation means. New stop printing money. Argentina, haha, money printer go burr. I'll start. In my country, the government switches off all electricity for 2 to 3 hours at a time, several times a day, to reduce load on the power systems. As I am busy typing this, I'm sitting by candlelight in complete darkness. Edit. I've been waiting to be able to make this edit on a post, but thank you. My first awards. Looks like there does come something good from load shedding. I live in Pakistan, and after I found out that other countries don't have this, I started hating Pakistan, and every time my power goes out I yell, "This country freaking sucks." Quote. This happens in small cities in India as well, but on a scheduled basis. It's called rostering. Not only in small cities, even in big cities. Rostering, also known as load shedding, was quite common until a few years ago. My school wouldn't have power from 2 to 4. School would end at 4 and I'd head home for the electricity in the area I lived in to be shut off from 4 to 6. It's sorta scheduled here in SA. They go off schedule quite a bit though. Cold sweat smile. Where are you from, if you don't mind me asking? South Africa smiley face. COVID and no electricity and online learning is not treating us well at the moment. Here in Peru, especially if you are not from the capital, to get a medical appointment, you need to wait 3 months. For surgeries or actual medical treatments it can take over a year. So many people I knew got random appointments just in case something happens. You'd better suffer the hemorrhage that day, or you have to pray for the eucalyptus tea to actually work. Thank goodness I was able to move to the capital some years ago. Crap, I didn't know this. That is absolutely horrible. Is there any way it could be changed over time? The way the system works? It's so unfair. I don't think so. Our country is known for our political destabilization, which of course affects the healthcare system. For you to have an idea, we've had 3 ministers of health in less than 5 months. So there is never time to actually make changes. We are also the top 1 country of deaths per million since the coronavirus outbreak and top 5 of reported cases. So if the situation was bad a year ago, just imagine now. Our system has collapsed to the point that even private clinics don't want to accept new patients. And if they do, the cost of using an ICU with mechanic ventilation goes from $42,000 to $84,000 for 4 weeks. Here in Peru the minimum salary is of $262. So, we are not really optimistic. Edit. I forgot to mention we are also the worst projected post-pandemic economy of South America. What happens to most people in medical emergencies? People injured in accidents or who had a heart attack. For those cases there is a cost, which is huge. By law, the hospital will accept the patient, but after the first aid has been given, the family has to sign documents where they commit to pay the totality of the cost. This is why many people in provinces in Peru die young. Families can't afford to pay medical treatments. In Lima, the capital, is different. There are enough ICU for those cases and costs of public hospitals are lower. However, you still have to wait 2 to 3 months to get appointments. That system still works bad in any part of the country. This is why many people in provinces in Peru die young. Families can't afford to pay medical treatments. That is sad. America isn't far off. I've had 2 surgeries in the past 2 years and the debt is killing me worse than just letting my abdomen rot, on top of student loans. Honestly, at this point I'd rather have just died. Having to stand for hours in bread lines, then for hours at the petrol lines, then for hours at the cooking gas lines, then coming back home to find that they shut off the electricity because there's too much load. I feel you, my fella Sudanese, lol. Or Egypt. Holy frick, I understand we in the US have problems, but this really puts it into perspective. It's one of the reasons why Reddit is saying, ugh, the US is basically a third world country now, because they had a slight inconvenience drives me up the wall. Most Redditors can't even conceive of what life is like outside of being in the richest 1% of the world. I'm pleasantly surprised to see someone react with "that's awful," instead of "oh, just like the US then," which seems to be commented under every single one of the top comments. Edit. To the people saying, some people in the US do live in third world conditions, I would like to point out that life is still good enough that none of those people are gathering together in the dark of night to get on a raft with 100 other people and very little food, launching that raft blindly into the ocean, and hoping it will take them someplace else, as people routinely do to get to the US from other countries. The very fact that you have heard about US citizens suffering is because those people have access to reliable communications and aren't vanished off the street for speaking out about rough conditions. There are no roving bands of gang rapists sanctioned by the government to silent dissidents. There are minimum wage laws ensuring people don't work for $1 a day. There are shelters for people who cannot find work. There are food banks for people who cannot afford food. There are safety laws that ensure you aren't paying rent to live under half a roof in a high-rise that is likely to collapse on you and the hundreds of other people crammed underneath it. One area not having access to clean water does not make the US a third world country. Medical debt does not make the US a third world country. Costly education doesn't make the US a third world country. In much of the world, if you don't have the money for an emergency procedure, it doesn't get done. I have volunteered in hospitals where people walk in with 11 open stab wounds and walk out with 11 open stab wounds because they can't afford the sutures. I have seen people walk for days to get to a free clinic, carrying no food and very little water, losing money they don't have by not working, because their child is sick, and if they don't make it to the pop-up clinic they won't have the opportunity to see another medical professional for years. So if you think parts of the US is third world, then go down this checklist. Have you been murdered by the government for seeming even remotely critical? Clearly not. Have you had water today? And did you have to walk 5 miles to haul it out of a shared well? Or did it come from a tap or bottle? Do you have a water allotment, where you only have access 2 days a week? If you were in a car accident, would you be treated in the emergency room, regardless of your ability to pay? If you go to work, is it okay if you're beaten? Do you get a break in 12 hours? If you lose your job, will you still have access to clean water? Are you able to whine about having it as badly off as the truly destitute on a computer attached to the internet? Internet that you don't have to pay for by buying a megabyte at a time on a scratch-off card from the corner store. Do you know anybody in the US who meets or fails to meet those criteria? Is it localized to an individual or individual area? Or is it a substantial part of the country? And if those don't fit you, then maybe stop melodramatically stating that, just because the US isn't perfect and has a lot of problems, you're living in a third world country and have it just as bad as people who have none of the privileges that come with being a US citizen. It doesn't make you look sympathetic or woke. It makes Americans seem entitled, self-absorbed, and ignorant. You don't see citizens of other first world countries moaning and tearing their hair about how bad They have it compared to everyone else because they're aware of what the rest of the world is like. It's embarrassing that so many Americans can only talk about what they don't have compared to Canada or Sweden and turn a blind eye to what they have that the majority of the world doesn't. It's never, what can I do for other people with what I have, and always, what can I get that I don't have already, and then, hilariously, complaining about other people's identical attitude being the reason you don't have more. This sounds like you're living in the USSR. I believe op lives in my country Sudan, and believe me when I tell you it's 20 times worse than hell would you imagine. Why do you believe they're from Sudan? I guess because I don't believe there is another country with this unique set of adversities. Since we managed to overthrow the old government of tyrants, our country was falling off a wicked spiral. It was falling because of the old government, and when the new government took over it was helpless situation. A member of each family stand on bread lines for 3 hours on average each day every day. Gasoline lines are harder to predict. Sometimes you can fill your car in under 30 minutes. Other times you have to stand in line for 2 days. I'm being dead serious. Also, cooking gas is very hard to get. At times you just give up and use coal for days straight. And finally, electricity is scheduled. One day it is taken off for 5 hours at night. The next it is taken for 3 hours at night. And on repeat. Edit. Sorry for the inconvenience with editing. Oh, that's pretty dark. Frick, it's seriously 2 days. In the capital it's a little better since the government is giving us more percentage of the whole gas, bread, cooking gas. On average, in the capital, you'll stand for an hour, but some days you might stand more than a day. In other states, on average you'll stand for 6 to 7 hours if you are lucky. If you weren't, then you'll have to spend a night in line. Well, I'm not grateful enough to have been born where I am. This is life. People take things for granted because they've been living it their whole life and haven't seen otherwise. In this country, every single citizen dream is to leave this country, and 99.99 fail because of the useless passport we are holding that is restricted from entering any decent country. Oh yes, and money. No one in here have money. How do you get access to the internet when everything else that would seem to be a basic utility is so restricted? Basic utilities are hard to get because they're so scarce in quantity. And our economy is trash, we're not producing anything. With that being said, internet is fairly easy to get and available to everyone. There are 3 main internet service providers with decent quality. Thank you for the answer. It's definitely surprising to hear that what would typically be viewed as somewhat of a luxury utility is easier to come by than food or gas. Is there anything that someone like me in the US can do to help you out or make things easier for you? You mean helping me personally? Yes, if you're open to that. I'd be willing to send some type of care package, or PayPal you some cash. Nothing crazy, as I'm by no means rich in US standards. But something in hopes of making at least one of your days a little brighter. Thank you, sir. I appreciate a lot, and I hope all your days get brighter. But I'm lucky enough to have my brothers living abroad, so I haven't been destroyed by inflation like most people in my country. In 2 months I'll finish my software engineering degree, and I hope I'll be able to leave this country and go work in US or Europe. In Argentina the price of everything raises almost every day. Argue here. I would say inflation and insecurity are the worst. Prices are a nightmare. If I'm walking down the street alone and hear a motorcycle approaching, I start having palpitations. I was robbed 2 weeks ago by a dude on motorcycle. Took my cell phone off my hands and went away. So now I'm even more paranoid. I can't go to certain neighborhoods or being late at night without being paranoid. IDK in other countries, but here thieves on motorcycles are a thing and even have a name for it. Motocorris. Argentinian here. You just go to the store expecting everything to be 5 to 10% more than the last time you went. How do you cope with that? Is it possible to put assets into other currencies or otherwise reduce the currency volatility? How do you cope with that? You just don't buy stuff. You buy food and a few things more. For example, my family goes to the supermarket and we buy food for the whole month. It ends up being cheaper than just buying it over time. Hopefully your salary, assuming you're employed, increases and keeps up with the inflation. Now they're paying us less than ever before. Thanks for watching LWIAR. The best of recent r/AskReddit submissions and comments. If you like this video, Check out LWIAR too. And don't forget to like and subscribe. Bye.